Welcome to the Cutting Edge Convention, a worldwide movement to revolutionize your life. No more stumbling around in the dark, wasting precious weeks, months, and years trying to figure it out on your own. Get ready for valuable innovations and strategies. And now, here's your host, Marcy Peters, the Age Backward Mentor.
Hello and welcome to the Cutting Edge Conventions, Revolutions to Innovate Your Life. Today, I want to tell you about some amazing information, but first let me introduce myself. I'm Marcy Peters, the Age Backward Mentor. I help smart, successful men and women love the life they're in and the body they're in even more. So let me introduce you to our guests today. I have two special people, and this is Damian and Heather Dube, and they have 50 years of combined education and experience as functional and diagnostic nutritionists, Hashimoto's and chronic fatigue conquerors, and we're going to talk about their story as we go. And they're going to teach you how to create and restore your metabolic wellness. So Heather and Damian, welcome.
Thanks for having us, Marcy. We're excited to be here.
Yes, so I'm excited to talk metabolic health. Also, we're going to touch on Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease. Yeah. So a lot of really good information here. So let's jump right in. First, I'd love to hear a little bit about why both of you are doing what you do.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Well, to help people, to serve people like yourself, for sure. It was just going through such a transformational experience. For me, when I had Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease, there were a lot of light bulbs going off because prior to that time in my life, in my early 30s, Damian and I had been blessed to do work in competitive athletics naturally and worked with some pretty well-known now or well-regarded nutrient biochemists, people in nutrition for changing body transformation essentially in a very safe and effective way. And so when you're in that world, you get to see a lot of coaches use high performance nutrition and program designs and these kinds of things. And so when I was sick, we were kind of like, well, if we're using these best practices over here and they're hastening results, why can't we take the best of what's working in this world and apply it when someone wants to heal? And so we felt like, when I went through that healing experience, we had an obligation to go out and teach this work to others and share it with others as an opportunity. One, so they know that they can heal and that it's possible to heal naturally if they choose that. And two, that there's cost and time efficient ways to do that.
Yes, I love that message and the inspiration behind it. And it is true that healing is possible. So let's talk about that. Damian, did you have anything to add?
That's her department. She's marketing.
Well, and that's why too. I love your age backwards. Like you're an age backwards mentor because it's that philosophy in athletics. You get to see that actually we get better as we age, not the opposite, right? And so I love that's what you're championing, with your audience and sharing.
I think another thing too is kind of dispelling a lot of the myths out there, that you need to be on medication for the rest of your life or that, you can't heal from these diseases, just making people understand that if they believe that they can heal and they acquire the right resources to do so, then it is possible.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I believe that too. We all believe it or else we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So let's first talk about autoimmune disease and specifically thyroid autoimmune disease. So how would someone know that this is part of the situation, that it's an issue in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question because, misdiagnosis, as we all know, is such a huge problem. That was what happened for me. I was 2 years into going to all sorts of GPs, general practitioners, and finally got to a medical doctor that was using labs to assess thyroid, and it was misdiagnosed. They said my thyroid was in normal range like they do for most women. So go ahead, Damian, you can chime in on this one.
Well, generally, if you have a gut feeling that you have a thyroid issue, then you probably do, right? Yeah. If you're experiencing some of the symptoms like cold hands and feet, low energy, low motivation or drive, brain fog, constipation, memory loss, anything like that, or unexplained weight gain, or you've been exercising and you're not responding to your exercise and diet like you used to, well, then the chances are you probably have some type of self-functioning thyroid.
Like we like to say, it's just, you can't just rely on the labs, because it's so common that we're talking with them and you find they come to you and they're like, well, my doctor said I don't have X, or I don't, but I still feel awful. I don't feel myself. I don't feel normal. I don't feel intimate with my husband or my partner, or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? So it's really, how is your body speaking to you? And then, there's just a laundry list of symptoms, like Damian was sharing, hair loss, brittle nails. There's so many things that could be happening if you potentially have an issue with your thyroid. But what we see people is that even when they're on thyroid medication, their body's still not correcting, right? So they find, like, why is my weight not shifting? And why does diet and exercise still not work? And, why am I not 100% in my energy? So they don't really get to come full circle, because those internal issues aren't really resolved.
Okay, great. So if someone suspects that this is the situation for themselves, and even if testing isn't showing it, what would be the first thing that they would do?
Find a practitioner that understands how to interpret, right? Because just because the test results don't, quote unquote, say that you have thyroid disease or you're in the quote unquote normal ranges, doesn't necessarily mean that your cells are taking up the hormone, or that your liver is helping to transfer that hormone to the binding sites, or that your thyroid's functioning sufficiently, or that your adrenal glands aren't the culprit of why your thyroid's malfunctioning. So there's so many different areas that we need to look at. So if we just look at the thyroid alone, a lot of times the results do come back normal, and we really need to kind of think outside the box. So the test results are only as good as the person that's interpreting them, and correlating them to the human being sitting across from you, because at the end of the day, their body speaks a lot louder than a test might,
Yeah.
So find somebody that understands how to interpret them, and can really look for the underlying or the root cause of the.
And there's some things they can do while they're seeking that out, because as we all know, that's not easy to find these days, right? And so, it surely wasn't for me. I had to cast a wider net and ended up flying around the country when I was ill to extend my search in year 3. And, most people, it isn't feasible to do what I did. It isn't feasible to leave your job and not have a salary and then go flying around and then go back to school to do it, DIY, essentially do it yourself. So my point being simply that while you're looking for someone that can serve you in that way, if that's what you need, there's other things you can do, like choosing, food elimination and things. In the meantime, I'm not saying that will necessarily resolve the issue, because these are internal issues that really have to be assessed using science. But we believe in test, don't guess. But you can start to eliminate, functionally offensive foods like, sugar, gluten, dairy, these things that would essentially, coffee, like, limit your body from being able to function metabolically, and your thyroid from being in a healthy state while you're searching for that kind of support.
Okay, yeah. That's good, solid advice. And I actually believe that's great advice for everyone, whether or not you're dealing with any health issues or any symptoms.
Absolutely.
Because just because it's not happening now or showing now doesn't mean there's not a buildup in
That's right.
the body that will start showing at some point, but it's been accumulating for quite a while.
And that's a super important point. I'm so glad you brought that up, Marcy, because the journey for us was like, how do I say this? So being into athletics like yourself and everything before I was sick, we already had a certain amount of commitment to food when I got sick. So that was partially what was so shocking, right? Because I always thought I had control, quote unquote, control of my body, but my body had more to teach me yet, that I really didn't have it all under control. And there was more to learn. And so when I was presented with that situation, and we wanted to dive deeper, it was such an awakening that, to your point, this is something everybody really should consider for their health, because making the choices that we did nutritionally and lifestyle and mindset in our environment, making the shifts that we did, it wasn't just that my, Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease healed. It was everything healed. It was like all the cold sores that I thought were normal that I got my whole life went away for the last 9 years and I don't get them anymore. You know, yeast infections, all these things, athlete's foot, that were what I thought were a normal human body experience, also healed. So to your point, like when you're making those steps, you can expect a greater experience, right, of your body, of your wellness overall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that can benefit everyone at some level, even if
Yeah.
there's low-lying problems that you've just
That's
accepted
right.
as how life is and how your body
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some common mistakes that people make when they're starting down this health journey?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. There's a lot. Okay, so I think that so
Thinking they need to go to a doctor,
yeah, that's
like
one.
a medical doctor, I think is one. Because at the end of the day, nutrition is what heals.
Yeah.
Right, and most doctors don't really have the education in nutrition to understand how to truly heal the body. Right.
You would ultimately need some form of doctor, practitioner, or nutritionist that has a scope of work in nutrition, because ultimately, if you're not going to change your food, to your point, it doesn't really matter what it is. Your body's not going to have what it needs in order to change for you. So another one that we see that I'm sure you see too is, well, if it doesn't work, if my diet and exercise doesn't, they have the thyroid issue, but they're like, why is my weight creeping up, and I'm out of control of my weight all of a sudden, and my body's not responding to my diet and exercise the way it used to. They just pile more on. They're like, I'll just work out more, or I'll just go do, 2 HIIT classes a day instead of 1, or like, I'll just go do an endurance race. Like, I'll just ratchet it up. And unfortunately, what that does is put more strain on your body functionally, metabolically, and draw out of a bank that's already depleted energetically. And so they naturally see this reaction where their body fights back. So they're in this like tug of war, and all of a sudden the weight gets worse. And I'm like, what's happening? So that's a common one, is that it's very incongruent. People don't understand that there's times when your body needs exercise in an intense level, and it also needs exercise in a peaceful way, in a loving way, coming from an energy or a space of, if like yin and yang, feminine, male energy. So instead of force, being gentle. And when you're having these kinds of health imbalances, specifically autoimmune, typically you have to consider that there's too many forms of stress happening right now: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, environmental. And so you have to take the non-negotiable, or the negotiable forms of stress off the table for a little while, if you will, or back them down. And exercise is usually one of them. So that's a common mistake we would see too. Oh gosh, any others?
Asking your spouse for what you need. I think a big mistake that a lot of women in particular make is they expect that their husbands or their significant others are going to understand what they're going through. And to be honest, we don't, because our bodies are completely different, right? So part of thyroid health especially is speaking your voice, speaking your truth, right? So being able to communicate what you need from your spouse, because the reality is you can't do it alone. When you're juggling schedules, juggling the kids, juggling cooking dinner and cleaning the house and stuff like that, something's got to give, right? So being able to ask for help and for assistance.
I have so many more to say. I would say a couple, and I'll just rattle them off really quick. I would say going on a general nutrition profile and not understanding that there's a bio-individual level of nutrition that can actually serve you. And that was something we didn't know until we went through this too, that actually you can use labs to get really clear on what nutrients your body wants or doesn't want. And then that can help. A lot of people don't know that's even possible. But I would also say trusting your inner doctor. I think this is fascinating to me. And I know I'm sure we could probably talk about that one, the 3 of us, for a long time, because you probably feel that way as well. Like that is sitting in the knowing, in your gut, in that energy of just trusting yourself. And I'm so thankful I did that through my own process, because I really believe I wouldn't be sitting with you talking if I had not. And it fascinates me, coming from a background in psychology, watching how many women don't come into their leadership relationships from a place of strength, of trusting their knowing and putting all of it in that practitioner's hands. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like, I don't know if I'm putting that into words, but like I've always just been that person. And I wish I could bottle it and give it to other women, because I just kind of assume everyone goes through their world that way. But now doing the work as a practitioner, I'm sure you see this too. A lot of the times as women, we're helping you build your legs and like stand up in trusting your body and listening to it, and not knowing that at the end of the day, whatever outcomes you have, it's up to you really, because you're the only one that lives with it. Your practitioner doesn't live with it. So why would you give that all over so fully and say, oh, whatever they give me, I'm going to just, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and you bring up two really great points, and these are things that I talk about as well. And the first thing is not looking for that magic pill, and not giving away your personal power, which is to say, hey doctor, you heal me, you fix me.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. Yes. Like that victim versus a non-victim mentality. Yes.
So that's personal responsibility. And then also, paying attention to your inner wisdom, what's important to you, what you know to be true inside.
Amen.
It actually takes getting still, getting quiet, slowing down, doing less instead of more, even if it's for short time, to be able to access that inner wisdom. And a mentor or a coach, someone like both of you or myself, can really help.
So huge. Yes, that would be like a big pitfall too, is that we would see is that I so agree with you in there, because like that philosophy again came from our background in athletics. And so even though we work with people clinically, there's a mentoring component. It's there's a coaching and clinical. So it's like two of it together. We don't really believe that an outpatient model is how anyone can get past any form of dis-ease. You really do need that, the person helping you work your mind and your process as you go through it and championing you, right? Because I'm sure like if you believe in your client, I can believe in my client more than they can believe in themselves, because we're on the other side, right? We know what's possible for them. And so people need that, they need that.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes such a difference. So the question is, do you want to try and figure it out on your own, weeks, months, and years? Probably more like years. You want to speed up the process.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I love your audience and who you're talking to in your summit, because that's absolutely why we were like fascinated with how do we take all these things and make this like, if you can get in the fastest path, why not do it? Like that's the way, but I think that's like, if you come from an athletic background, you tend to like emphasize that. It's a value for you, like the efficiency. Yeah.
Yes, I believe in efficiency as well. And for a long time, I was really stubborn and I wasn't willing to make the changes or to take advice or recommendations from people. So also, I think there's a timing component of, that you've been dealing with the pains long enough, whether the symptoms are actual pain or emotional pain, and you're finally ready to just say, you know what, I will do whatever
it takes. Yes, thank you.
That's a big one.
Yes, there was that. I think we all, I like we all have that moment. Any of us that have been through a transfer, there was this moment for me where literally, like that moment where I looked at my husband and I'm like, my face is blown up. Like I can. Do you mind if I share the picture? Kind of like this is what I was going into work. Like every day, like I would put glasses on. I was embarrassed. My eyes were swelled shut. I had like eczema on. And I knew at that point, I didn't even know that I had thyroid and autoimmune disease. But I knew, this is the after. That was the athletics like 2 years after. Anyway, they can't see through the light. But it was this just moment for me of like, enough. Like it was just this flip switch. And I was like, I had to leave my job. I had to, because I felt like I knew enough in the knowing that every form of stress was like flaring my symptoms up. And we were going through a buyout in my company. It was really extreme. I've always been like a type of person that's high sensing, like with energies. I can't be physically near like lack of integrity. Like it just, when I was watching people get let go left and right, and it just, my body was screaming. And I just said to him, I didn't know why, but I was like, I cannot go physically into this environment anymore. And I literally took a box into my office that day, packed up my cubicle, said, I'm not fighting for disability. I'm not doing anything. I have to leave and I have to go figure this out,
Yeah. I think to kind of ride that wave, when you wait until the point that you're just totally ready to do it, right? Because you just feel like such garbage that you've hit that wall and it's like the last resort type of thing. It takes a lot more time, energy, and money to get back from that point, right? So if you feel like you're kind of like going down that path, get to it. Get to it sooner, because it'll be a lot easier, a lot less costly.
I think what he's trying to say is back to your point before, Marcy, when you first asked, why did you guys do this? Like, why do you do what you do? Because for us, like those 2 years that I was looking for answers, like it wasn't like I wasn't trying. There was never, I just want to be very clear. Like I never took medication. I never took a thyroid med. I never took Synthroid. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to find solutions. I was scratching and clawing. Like that's because that's the type of person I am. And so it wasn't like I was sitting back. And by the time, the thing is that went on for 2 years to that point where I showed you the before picture. So to clean up that mess was like $40,000, and I was out of work. And that's also when the economy bottomed out and he lost his job, not once, 3 times in a row after I left my job. And then we lost our house. So it was like this, the universe was kind of sending the waves.
Well, we're trying to reduce stress.
Right? But we always stayed committed to healing. That we never, whatever, was thrown our way. We were like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Again, sitting in that knowing. And we just wish for everyone, like to Damian's point, don't wait. Like you don't wait until, because that's a type of personality of an autoimmune woman. It's somebody who fronts it all on their shoulders. They're very type A. I've got this all buttoned up. I can spin all the plates. They don't ask for help. They're a perfectionist, and you wait until you're literally hanging off the cliff by one finger, and like, that's the part where when you have to clean up that mess, I mean, it was huge. It forever changed the course of our lives, and no regrets because we believe it was meant to happen. But going through bankruptcy from the medical costs and everything was very challenging, So we just want people to know that when you're on thyroid medications, the problem is that's just a patch. It may be making your symptoms feel a little bit better, but whatever's going on internally actually is still dormant and active and still potentially growing and could go into something else, right? You just don't know. And so that's what makes us scared for people and concerned, and why we shout from the mountaintops.
What I'm hearing is the number one piece of advice is don't wait until you're on your last dregs of energy. And, you can barely have the energy to get yourself better. Actually, ask for help. And the great thing is there are people like you, there are specialists who can get you through it faster, easier, and you can have the support. Heather, you brought up a good point about the type of person who's dealing with autoimmunity. So autoimmunity means that the body is attacking itself. And so on a literal basis, on a physical basis, it is attacking itself. And I believe there's an emotional, mental component too, where you're attacking yourself with your thoughts and your ideas and your beliefs about yourself and about the world. And that is adding to the problem. It might be creating the situation, or it might be adding to the problem.
Absolutely.
That there's a physical and an emotional, like there's a whole body response that we have to the world and to our thoughts and to what's going on. It's never isolated. It's all part of each other. So do you want to speak on that a little bit? Yeah,
that's so beautiful. You really hit it on the nail on the head. It's really hard for me when we get emails from women all the time, and it's like, well, what's the one supplement you took that changed your thing? And I get these emails, and I wish it were that simple, but it really, transformation. So transformation is an experience that starts with the physical, moves to the mental, and finishes with the spiritual. If you take it all the way, it will be an awakening. And that was true for me. I just followed intuitively what I felt. But first, like I said, it took me making a decision followed by massive action. That's how we do change, right? So I made a clear decision. I drew the line in the sand. I left my job and said my health is going to be number one right now. That put out the energy to the universe, God, whatever you believe, that I was ready to heal, as you say. You said it before. You're like, you have to be ready to heal. And I was in the energy of readiness. At that point, by doing that, I opened up the space in my life. Until you really open up the space, all you can focus on is what's right out in front of you, which is the physical. So we go to the food. What do I need to do? But as you start to open the space, that opportunity gave me, like you said, time to listen. time to sit in the silence, time to pray, time to meditate. As I did that, I started to say, how did I call this stress into my life? That is the mentality of a non-victim. That is someone who's saying, this is here as a teacher, not an annoyance. This is here because I want to learn from this. And so in that space, and I think I just kind of did this natural type of self-assessment. I've always been kind of nerdy about that stuff because my undergrad is in psychology. So like Myers-Briggs test, like all this stuff, like I started pulling out all my tests, you know, and, but it was more like you said, it was like, I was acknowledging just innately the psychophysiological aspects of stress. And I was saying, who is Heather at 30 something? How am I seeing my world? What was I doing? What am I doing in my relationships? What am I doing in my marriage? What am I doing in what I expect of myself, and how I communicate, you know, so that it welcomes stress into my life? And how can I shift that and put on like a different pair of glasses and maybe see my world a little differently? And then I just started to explore that. And at that point I found my voice a little bit more, and I opened my mouth and told my husband what I needed more. And I said, you know, I'm kind of at my breaking point on this, like this, and this has to be off the list. And I also acknowledge that as women, we tend to have this, like you said, we attack ourselves. It's that mental tape of like the perfectionism, like, you know, we don't see ourselves the way other people see ourselves. And even like I found that at that point in my life, like, you know, I had this intense marketing job. I was like, you know, living the way the world tells us we have to live, and by the world standards that was determining my worth. You know, did I have the 401k? Did I have the, you know, marketing job title, and like measuring myself up against all these things, you know, perfect marriage. Did I have the perfect body? Like, was I working my fitness process? Like all these things. And I came to this space that the illness was just a gift, because it knocked me off that reality and made me turn inward and turn the mirror and reflect inward. And like, how am I seeing my world? How am I doing this? How am I creating stress in my life? Mental, physical, you know, emotional, spiritual. And I started to connect all the dots and see all these connections. And then I also had to accept at that point that I living my spiritual truth. And that's a little bit further. We don't usually go that far down. We find that when we're working with clients, and this is why we work with them in tandem, like we don't work with them separately. I stay on the psychology side and he stays on the clinical side, because exactly what you say, we have to acknowledge that every person is individual and unique. And where we meet them in their journey, it may be their mental tape that's blocking them more than something else, but it's usually all of the above that we need to acknowledge and self-assess, and then make some shifts in so that we open up the space for our body to relax and, like, you know, take it down a notch. So I'm so grateful to you for bringing that up, because we're so aligned with you on that, and totally believe it's such a huge piece that's not even getting discussed in doctors' offices. It's not even getting scratched on the surface, or practitioners' office, because they just don't, even if it's in their scope of work, which often they're not, when it is, they don't have the time. They don't have the time in a 15-minute, you know, appointment, that kind of thing. So super important. And I did go through just a process naturally at that point in my life of self-reflection and making some changes in how I think and how I think towards my body and the mental tape. While I was focused on healing, you know, it wasn't ever in my mind like, why do I feel like garbage today? Oh my God, why is this weight on me? None of that. I just went up every day, went through my rituals, my healing, you know, rituals or whatever I was doing, my tea, whatever I'm taking in the morning. And it was all gratitude. It was all gratitude. I am so thankful to be alive. I'm so thankful to be on the upswing. Thank you for everything you do for me. That's the way I was talking in here to the rest of this. And that's the way you get it to move. That's the way you get it. When it hears that love, it responds, you know?
For me, it came down to self-love. I mean, yes, the nutrition, yes, the sleep, yes, the right amount of exercise, not too much and not too little. Yes,
right.
You know, all of these things, the right supplements and so forth. And without that foundation of self-love, the rest of it has a hard time, you know, really making a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So far. And then, you know, like, it's the internal work. So I always say, take the strategies and combine it with the internal work. So the strategies are the behavioral, the outside things, but what's going on the inside is also important, and it's setting the tone for the rest of it. So that's what
That's
I
right.
remember you saying too, that you had that journey of self-love and acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and part of that, like, I love that you say acceptance too, because that was part of my choice too, to pursue a different path, even professionally at that point. It was clear to me that I was never going back to marketing. Even though I was doing marketing and nutrition and it brought like my passion for creative and nutrition together, it was clear to me that it was never going to be, we wanted to be in a place of service. And that was kind of, that's also, like you say, it's an acceptance of your truth. It's an acceptance of your truth. So.
And then Damian brought up a great point about using your voice, and you mentioned it too.
Yeah.
Saying what you need and actually speaking up.
This is so hard for women. This is so hard. So simple, but yes, so hard.
And that goes back to you, how worthy you think you are, that you're able to ask for help and assistance, and you're able to do it from a place of personal power, not from a place of victimhood. Different things. And I also wanted to mention, too, part of victimhood can be, when you're taking personal responsibility, is then blaming yourself. So instead of blaming circumstances or other people or the doctors who can't fix you, turning it inward. And so just recognizing if that's happening, that's still blaming, that's still victimhood.
Oh, beautiful. I've never heard that. That's beautiful. I love that you said that, and you're acknowledging that in women, because like it's weird to me that there's no blame energy in my vocabulary, or like my thought, like it never even comes up. It's more, I look at things as like, this is an adventure. Like, what do I want to learn from this? Like, I try to stay in that positive psychology space of like, what is the teacher here? And it really does make such a difference coming from that place, right? Instead of acknowledging that maybe the universe is wanting me to learn something. Maybe there's a message here greater than myself, coming from a place of that faith and gratitude. I love that you said that though, because you see that in women a lot, that like guilt, it's this like guilt, shame, like these pieces that come up, and all those have to be eradicated if you're going to receive healing. They truly are. And to the speaking your truth, like we say, you have to, in order to go forwards, you have to go backwards. And so it was even a couple of years into my healing that I realized that some of my healing and some of my autoimmune disease process and the healing was coming from much, much earlier on in my life, where actually my voice was suppressed during my childhood. And I was in a space where I wasn't allowed to speak my truth because someone's truth was dominant over everyone else's. And so everyone else kind of just shut down and didn't bother speaking anymore. And so I kind of carried that into adulthood. But I see this in women, I'm sure you do too, where we think we're having a conversation like with somebody, like particularly I think in relationships with our partner or husband, we think we're asking for what we need, but actually the conversation's going on in your head and you're not really having what my mother-in-law would call a fireside chat, like actually sitting down and like, okay, let's take a pause and like, let me really express what I need here. And like, so they're thinking they're asking, and then they kind of stay in this energy of frustration, and they're not really getting enough and trying to take on too much, I think, as women. And so there is a real core theme of expression that needs to be healed, I think, in women around a lot of form of healings. But we see that with women with thyroid and autoimmune for sure.
And men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I mean, it is true, right? So as a man, when a woman comes to us, expressing that they don't feel well or whatever, our mind shifts to, well, how am I going to fix it? Right? And that's all we think about, right? So when Heather initially was coming to me and saying, I don't feel well, I would just say, well, go get a workout, right? It'll make you feel better, because that's what worked for me. And obviously our bodies are the same, right? So, it's going to work for you. But the reality is that, sometimes we can't fix them. So we have to, as men, we have to kind of just support them. And there's been a lot of times where I've actually had calls with our clients' husbands just to kind of confirm to them that, their wife is going through something. Here's what you need to do as a husband to support her. And what she's experiencing is real. You may not see it, but it's real. And here's why. And sometimes that alone helps.
I think what's amazing though is women, I just had like this moment of like a divine download that if we don't speak for ourselves, or to some point our bodies will speak for us. See what I'm saying? So I think it's really fascinating in the imbalance, particularly with thyroid, because we're talking about, fifth chakra from here to here and then down into the body. If this is broken and it's not getting enough energetic flow, eventually you're going to have dis-ease, and then your body is going to start to express for you, which was what was happening in my before picture. It was kind of like, whoa, screaming. So I just think there is such an intimate connection. And to your point so beautifully before, the journey begins with food. It begins with food. From there, it's going to unravel into what else you need to receive, to be open to your healing. So you start with the physical, which lays the foundation to be open to the rest of what needs to come.
Yes. And I love what you said about, our bodies do communicate. It just can't speak the way that we speak in words and so forth, but our bodies are speaking all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how it does it. I think that's great. When you're not talking, it comes out in other ways.
That's right.
Absolutely. So we talked about nutrition, some very definitive things, cut out the inflammatory foods, sugar, dairy, gluten.
Yeah.
Those are kind of a given at this point in this conversation to most of us who have been in this conversation.
Yeah.
Other things that listeners can do aside from contacting you, which, would be the obvious next step.
Yeah. Well, I think I would take a baseline of like where you are in your energy space. So if you're in a more advanced form of fatigue, which, like, for example, if you find yourself crashing at like 3 or when you get home from work and you literally have to lay on the couch and you can't get much done. If you're having brain fog and things are just like literally disappearing, you have your checkbook out and all of a sudden like the number's gone. Like, if you're working out and doing all the right things, but literally your weight is going way, 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 way high, and it seems to the point that it's chaotic or out of control. These are things that all would tie into like being in a more advanced form of adrenal fatigue. In those kinds of situations, you want to obviously, like you said, remove the functionally offensive things, but even consider ways that you can allow your body to rest more. So some of the ways you can allow your body to rest more is when you're thinking about preparing your foods. Don't do, as much raw, like you actually, if you help your body by aid it, in terms of digestion by breaking it down, steaming your food, that kind of thing, having a percentage of foods that are not as much raw, because that takes more work for the body to break down in terms of thermogenic effect of feeding and HCl and all these things that has to break it down in the gut. So being cognizant of how you prepare your food can even help in terms of your energy. We would say definitely like exercise, there you should be concerned about what type of program design you're doing. So for example, you would want to be shy away from doing like HIIT training, things that are going to take your body in that really intense up-down state. Or long-term endurance type training. So long runs, long bike rides, all those things are going to draw way too much out of your energy bank. You want to choose more restful exercise, things like Pilates that get the blood flow going, but use the muscular system, the skeletal system, but at the same time won't be as intense on the adrenals. Endocrine disruptors are some things. So you would be more mindful of endocrine disruptors, things in your environment that could be limiting you from healthier thyroid function. So is there chlorine or aluminum in your products? Do you have a lot of electromagnetic field around your house, devices in your house? Things that you can do to actually block those things are all super important. And we go through some of that in like our, we call it our E3 energy evolve system, but essentially you look at your energy in, your energy out, and then your energy environment. And you want to do it in that strategic way because your energy in is the most important when you're having these issues. It's like 70% of what you're doing that matters. So like we're talking about your food, and then also things like prayer, meditation, sleep, regulating your sleep. So, and that's also a point I'm sure your listeners have heard really regularly, but the hours you want to be mindful of for sure is like being in bed by like 9, 10 at the latest, consistently, and not looking at, computer devices, your phone, right up until, you go to bed, because of the connection with melatonin and such, you can regulate your sleep. So then, that to us is like the big bucket. And then you kind of look at energy out. Okay, so that's another 20%. What am I doing there? And that's like your, any health imbalances that you have, regulating those, stressful people in your life, like anything that drains your energy, your exercise, and then your energy environment, which we consider areas of detoxification, endocrine disruptors, and things in your home in general that you should be more cognizant of. And that's like the icing on the cake. So that's like the 10%, right? Like that would be the piece that helps you aid your body to self-regulate better. But you definitely want to start at the top, which is your food, which is for sure your food. So.
Yeah. Okay. So you have both given us so much to think about, given everyone, a chance to start to make some changes or consider some changes. Is there anything as we start to wrap up in this conversation that we haven't talked about? Before you get to your free gift?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I love that we took it from the physical to the psychological and into the spiritual, because those are really important to us too. And there are ways that like we, clean up our body energetically, for sure, is living in congruence and living in integrity with what our truth is. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a piece of it too, but it comes a little further on the journey. So I would just have patience with yourself. And just realize this didn't all come in a day for us. That didn't all come in a day for Marcy. So it's like, this is a journey. Accept that it's a journey and it's an opportunity to learn. And, just be open to receiving and open that this is possible. People are doing it, and so it's possible for anyone. It really is just first believing and then deciding and then taking action.
I think something I like to talk about is just understanding that, when you're in that constant fight or flight mode, right? So you're in that constant stress mode. It's gonna have a trickle down to every system in your body, right? So, in my opinion and experience, it all starts with the adrenal glands. It all starts with your stress response, right? So our adrenal glands are designed to stimulate when we have a dangerous situation coming upon us, right? Where we need to either fight or flee, right? Problem is that in today's world, we're constantly at war. We're constantly at battle, and that battle starts to turn inward, and our bodies start to battle themselves, which we were kind of talking about for the last 40 minutes, So if we can kind of do things that are going to pull us out of that fight or flight, it's going to allow for further restoration, So the meditation is huge. Sleeping on time is huge. Bigly. Certain supplements that can add more of a calming effect, so that you're not hopped up on stimulants all day, so removing coffee from your diet, because all that's going to do is that's going to keep you in that sympathetic state, in that fight or flight state, so adding in things like ashwagandha or even some low dose lithium to kind of pull you out of that fight or flight, which can then allow for further restoration.
Yeah, and I think to that point, like you touched on before too, is that a person going through thyroid and autoimmunity is a person that their body is perceiving they're at war. That's essentially what it is. It's feeling hyper responsive to everything, and it's feeling attacked. And this is how, if it's responding to you that way, if, you have allergy symptoms, like I was popping Zyrtec like candy when I was sick. It was because everyone told me, oh, but you just have allergies, But if you're having this like body that's like hyper responding to everything, and the weight's piling on and all that, essentially it didn't really matter what someone's telling you do or don't have. Obviously there's something that your body's telling you, and you have to listen. You have to listen and respond to, getting it resolved. So.
And that goes back to self-love, we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's loving to respond to your body in a way that supports it and boosts it up and sets it up for success, setting yourself up for success with your foods, your thoughts, and your... Absolutely is just a behavior of self-love. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. You both added so much to this conversation about innovations and cutting edge, and really how to make big transformations in people's lives. So I want to say thank you, and I want to have you talk about your free gift, because this is for everyone who is here with us today to actually take advantage of being in your community.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. So we have a free guide.
We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, we did a little bit. We have a free guide. That's our E3 Energy of All System guide that kind of walks them through some of what we were talking about before, Marcy, in terms of what our system is and how you self-assess your energy in, your energy out, your energy environment, a couple starter tips that they can focus on so it doesn't feel overwhelming at first under each one of those levels. And then we have some recipes in there, because I will say that learning how to eat this way in a way that produces joy and is sustainable is not easy to do, right? That's one of the largest complaints we hear when someone's making that transition, is like, this is a different way of eating. Like, how do I actually enjoy these foods? And so exploring that, the relationship with food, is something that's important to help, to us to help them with too. So there's some recipes in there that we used and that Damian actually creates, because I'm not the cook in this thing. He is. So he actually does all our recipes, and so they're really, really good. And I'm very grateful for his Italian mom.
Yeah, and kind of just to talk about food real quick, because I know we're kind of closing, but it does correlate to a lot of what we've talked about today. Food is what provides life, right? It provides the nutrients, right? So when you approach cooking your dinner with anger or hostility because you're tired, it's late, you just had a long day, and
it absorbs that energy.
It absorbs that energy, right? And then we're transferring that energy back into our bodies, right? So if you can approach it with thank you for this food, thank you for nourishing me, and I'm going to enjoy preparing a meal that's nourishing my body, and have fun with it. Try different things, experiment. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Throw it around the kitchen.
Just but even when you handle your food, it's transferring that energy.
So if they want to grab that guide, it's at e3energyevolved.com/guide.
Okay, great. So I'm going to for everyone, E3 Energy.
Yeah.
/guide.
Perfect.
And so Damian, thank you for bringing that up. That makes me want to just mention, so the energy that goes into the food is really important to eat the food. And that's why I don't believe personally in eating food or meats from animals that are factory farmed because of the way they're raised.
Treated.
Right.
Yeah.
That they have. So this is my little plug, buy organic, buy free range grass-fed meats from animals who get to enjoy life and be outside and be eating to be eaten.
Right.
Sorry, Gipper did you hear Gipper in the background? He agrees. Sorry. Gipper agrees. He gave that a big thumbs up. Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up. I want to say thank you, Heather and Damian, today. You two are amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for being part of the Cutting Edge Convention. We don't want you to miss a single valuable session. To have the entire event available to you at any time, purchase the package now before the event ends. That's when the price goes up. And watch your emails to get your next steps from Marcy.